Okay, good morning, everybody. And for our last few classes that we have of the semester, I want to talk a little bit about us as human beings and as a species, who we are related to, and refer a little bit to our presence on the planet as just one other organism. Another organism, just like many other thousands upon thousands of organisms who have been subject to evolutionary pressures over many hundreds of millions of years to end up where we are today with what we see around us. Now, I will point out that this diagram here probably is familiar to you, it's almost like an evolutionary meme that you see so often. In some ways, it has its accuracies, this one, because it does actually try to accurately represent these different species, which we know from the fossil record. But there's something here which is incorrect and which needs to be cleared up right at the very start. There is no single line that leads to human beings. These, what we see in this line here, are reconstructions from fossil records of things which are related to human beings. But we don't think that this refers to like grandparents, great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, etc. This does not refer to direct ancestry. Instead, you need to think about these as being cousins, 22nd cousins, 50,000 times removed. There were many species of ape who were related to the line that led to humans. But we have no way of knowing, when we look at a fossil, we have no way of knowing if that fossil is a direct ancestor. Instead, what we do, we rather regard all of these many species that were related to one another in this cloud of relatives of the humans, which we call the hominins. We look at them and we try to infer what an ancestral trait might have been that we need to follow. And we're going to see that, in fact, although there are many different species that I will mention, there are a couple of things which we're going to follow in human evolution. And that is in particular the ability to walk upright, which distinguishes us. Our constant upright gait distinguishes us from all of the other relatives that we have had. The second thing is that the increase in brain size. As we look through the fossil record, we observe that there is an increasing brain volume, finally ending up with the latest members of our species. And the other thing is sophisticated tool usage, is planned tool usage. This is something that distinguishes our whole genus, Homo, is that we can plan to make a tool and execute it and then have a useful tool at the end. So those are the sorts of things that we're going to trace. But remember that when I talk about this, I'm never implying that something I'm speaking about is a direct ancestor. We simply have to infer some things from what is available to us in the fossil record. So first of all, we want to place us as a species. And we are related to all other living organisms. We are related by the fact that we have arisen through a lengthy process over nearly 1 billion years of evolution, which has led to all of the diversity that we see around us on the planet. However, there's also a unity, and that unity reflects our common ancestry. The greatest unity of all is that all living things on the planet utilize DNA as the hereditary material. we all share that characteristic. And that is a reflection of the fact that that is how the first cell evolved. The first cell evolved with DNA as the hereditary material, and we have all arisen from that single cell over a period of billions of years. When we look at organisms that are living today, we see that we are related to different things by different features. So, for example, we belong to a phylum, a huge phylum called the Phylum Chordata. And here is one of our relatives in that phylum. This is a sea squirt. There are various other chordates as well. Here is another of them here. And we are related to them from a very important morphological feature. All chordates at some time or another, I don't know if you can make it out here. There's a rod running down this animal here. It runs down, it's a gelatinous, cartilaginous rather, rod that runs through there. And all chordates at some time or another have that feature. It's called the notochord. So it's a cartilaginous rod. All chordates at one time or another have it. We have it as a fetus in the womb. And it's then transformed into the centrum, the big articulating surface of our vertebrae. So it's the notochord is present in the fetus, but then it's transformed, it's lost eventually. But these are relatives of ours. They are actually relatively recent relatives. We share a common ancestry some 500 million years ago or so. That relationship was established long ago in the 19th century, purely on morphological grounds. But if we go now to our DNA record, we can see that that is actually true, that we can see the relationship. If we look at our DNA, we can see that we have in fact arisen from a common ancestor with these. Notice how I phrase it. I don't say that this is our ancestor. I don't even say that our ancestor looked like this or our ancestor looked like this. What I'm saying is that if we look far back enough in time, we'll see that these organisms and us, we share a common ancestor somewhere way, way back. So here's our remote cousins. Say hello. These are the sea squirts, also called the Tunicates. This is just another chordate. Don't worry about what its name is. So first of all, we are chordates. Second of all, we are vertebrates. That means that we actually have our spinal cord is enclosed, and it's enclosed in a protective and flexible articulating structure, the spine, which distinguishes all vertebrates. That spine is not necessarily made of bone. In most vertebrates now, it is made of bone. But of course, there's this huge group of very important fish, the sharks and their relatives. They are also vertebrates, but they don't have a bony spine. They have a cartilaginous spine. It's just made of cartilage. But all vertebrates have an internal skeleton, and they have some protective covering around the spinal cord running down from the brain. The other thing about the vertebrates now in the modern times is that most vertebrates possess jaws. There are a few which don't, and which are kind of obscure groups. But that was not always true. For many millions of years, vertebrates did not have jaws. There were many vertebrates, but they didn't have jaws. Jaws evolved later than the spine. So we don't include that as a characteristic of the vertebrates, because there are still a few vertebrates without jaws, but most vertebrates now have jaws. The reason, having jaws is very, very, very successful. It makes you a very good predator. It makes for much more efficient nutrition and everything else, because you can chew stuff or cut it up and swallow it, etc. Living without jaws is actually quite a difficult thing to do. So we are chordates, we are vertebrates with an internal skeleton, and we are mammals. Now, if I ask you, I'd always do this in a live class, I'll always ask, what is the characteristic of the mammals? And the commonest, most popular answer is the people who say, we give birth to live young. It is true that most mammals do that, but not all mammals do, surprisingly enough. There are some mammals which lay eggs, and those are things like the ductal platypus, the spiny echidna in Australia. So there are a few organisms, a few mammals, which actually do not give birth to live young. They lay eggs instead. That is a reflection of evolutionary history. And the mammals that do that are very, very primitive mammals, but they are the remaining representatives of mammal groups that were very common at one time, but then were superseded by mammals which gave birth to live young. No, the thing that makes us mammals is all mammals have hair, well, to a certain extent, and all mammals feed their young with milk. Those are the two major characteristics of the mammals. And apart from that, it's a very, very diverse group. Now, in thinking about that, you might think, no, wait a minute, what about things like the whales and the dolphins, those sorts of things? It's easy to picture a tiger because it's covered with hair. And it obviously feeds its young with milk. How about a rhino? Was a rhino, wait, where's a rhino's hair? A rhino does have hair. It actually has hair on the skin. It's not easy to see. It has hair on the tail. But the rhino horn is modified hair. It's a whole huge group of hair which is produced in this and welded together into the horn. The rhinos do have hair, and they very definitely feed their young with milk. How about the dolphins, the whales, those sorts of things? Do they have hair? Yes, they do. In the uterus, they do. That is for a start. But some of the whales also have modified hair. For example, there are whales which are filter feeders that grab huge volumes of seawater and pass it through filters in the mouth and eat whatever it is that they filter out of the seawater. Those filters are called baleen, are made of modified hair. So the cetaceans, the whales, very definitely do have hair, and they definitely feed their young with milk. They have an adapted way of doing it. The teats are underneath here, and when the young feeds, it doesn't so much have to suck all the way most mammals do. The mother's breast tissue actually contracts quite strongly and shoots milk into the mouth of the young, so that they get a lot of milk without a lot of seawater added to it. So all of these, they all have hair, they all feed their young with milk, just as we do. We are mammals. We're chordates, we are vertebrates, and we are mammals. The mammals are a huge, extremely diverse group. And so our group that we belong to, our order, is the order Primata, the primates. And again, it's quite diverse. There's all sorts of things that our members that I'll show you that we are quite closely related to. We share a common ancestry with all of the other primates. And the primates have some distinct characteristics. First of all, they are relatively large-brained for their size, and they tend to have flat faces. And very importantly, all primates have binocular vision. the eyes point forward, and they have stereoscopic vision. They can see with depth. The other thing is that all primates have an opposable thumb. That means the thumb can do this. It can oppose to the fingers like that. That is not a characteristic of most other mammals. Most other mammals, they have 5 digits, but the thumb cannot perform that kind of action. That is characteristic of the primates. They also, this is not unique to the primates, but all primates show complex social interaction. There are complex social structures that they live in. And a lot of the social structure is actually learned. And when we look at different groups of primates, even the same species, we look at different groups of primates, we see that there is actually a culture. Different groups develop different rituals, different ways of interacting. The same basic rules, but there are nuances to their behavior which distinguish one group from the other. Their behavior is to a certain extent adaptable. Characteristically for the primates, primate young require a lot of parental care during their development. Things like an antelope, those sorts of things, they are born fully functional. They will be up and running and everything within hours. The primates require a long parental nurturing. And the reason for that is probably because of this large brain. The brain develops substantially for a period after birth. And until the brain is relatively mature, the young have to be cared for. Now, within the primates, there are many different groups. I mentioned them here, and I'll show you exactly what they're like. Starting the lemurs and tarsiers, those are relatively primitive, and then monkeys and apes, etc., are a younger group, and we regard them as being kind of more advanced primates. We are members of an ape group, and the word ape is actually just a common name. It has no scientific meaning, really. The group that we belong to is called the Hominoidea. The Hominoidea include all of the apes. We'll see in a minute, and I'll tell you the distinctions between these different primate groups. So here's just for example, here are primate hands. It's true of the feet too, but it is much more easily visible in the hand. That primates have hands and feet which are adapted for grasping, or which were most of the groups are adapted for grasping. So there's huge similarity, for example, between our hands and the hands of other apes. The thumb here, you can see this is a chimp here, and you can see that this chimp could oppose that thumb to any of these digits. Same for us. And there's just a huge similarity in look, and one of the reasons for that is that all the primates have flat nails. They don't have claws. They have flat nails like that. And the only other thing I'll point out quickly is look at the shape of the chimp hand, and you'll see how long it is. And that is a disadvantage because it means it's difficult to actually, although the thumb is opposable, it's difficult to do very small, fine scale precision movements with the thumb and the fingers. And this is a trend that we see as we look through the fossils. We see the hand changing shape. The hand changes shape in concert with the development of the ability to make fine tools. Chimpanzees, I should tell you, do use tools. I think I've got a picture in a minute. They use tools, but they'll pick up stuff, and they may modify it slightly to use it, but they don't modify extensively. They don't have the ability to plan out, I'm going to make a hand axe, right? And then I'm going to use it. Instead, they'll pick up things, use them, and drop them. But they definitely can use tools. They just don't make refined tools. Okay, so there are 3 groups of living primates, and these are the primitive primates here: lemurs, lorises, potos, and tarsiers. And then the monkeys and the apes all belong to a group called Anthropoidia. So, and let's have a look. Here are these are the very primitive primates, still extant. These you can find in Africa and Asia. And these here are galagos, which are really gorgeous little animals, very really quite common in Africa. And they are commonly called bush babies for a very irritating reason, and that is that they have an incredibly loud cry, which sounds like a baby in distress. And believe me, having had to endure it many an occasion, when they come and sit on your top of your roof and scream all night, they do not look quite as adorable as they do in these pictures. You can see the typical primate features, these huge eyes. They are nocturnal. They have very, very big eyes to see in dim light. Flattened face, eyes pointing forward, binocular vision, and the grasping feet here are quite obvious. And if you look at their little hands and feet, you'll see the typical primate structure with little flat nails. And the thumb opposable to a certain extent. These are regarded as being primitive primates. And in the fossil record, way back, there are fossils which look like this, which suggest that these are, we see features here which are reflective of the old ancestors to the primates. These are marvelous, wonderful animals called the lemurs, and they only occur on Madagascar, an island which separated off from Africa fairly early on and carried its island fauna with it. And whereas in the rest of Africa, the ancestral forms which had given rise to the lemurs and then the rest of the primates, that they proceeded on their evolutionary path to produce the monkeys, the apes, everything else. And lemurs died out in the rest of the continent. But they are still present in Madagascar, where they are quite diverse. So once upon a time, the lemurs were extremely wide. The lemur-like animals were extremely widespread. And it is quite possible that the ancestral primates of Africa and the rest of the world arose from ancestors which had lemur-like qualities. Again, you can clearly see the primate features: forward-facing eyes, grasping hands, etc. And here it is with its beautiful baby clinging to it, its lengthy parental care. And they indeed do have very complex social groups with very complex interactions with one another. Very beautiful animals, extremely endangered, very, very, very highly endangered, unfortunately. Madagascar is an island, it's a large island, but it is subject to tremendous habitat destruction. Unfortunately, the forests on Madagascar are being cut down at just a frightening rate and being burned out so that people can use the land for farming. And that's all lemur habitat that is being lost. Lemurs are highly endangered and several species have already gone extinct. Okay, so here now we move to this group, which I'm sure you have an instinctive grasp for anyway, and these are the monkeys. Yes, we are indeed related to the monkeys, but we're related to the monkeys because monkeys and the apes share a common ancestor, not because we arose from monkeys. We did not. The line which leads to humans shares a common ancestry with the monkeys that we see around us. And those groups arose, the very early groups arose before continents had separated from one another. There was one giant continent at one time, which split up into the continents that we see today. These groups, the monkeys, arose before then, before that split took place. Then as those continents moved apart, the two monkey groups diverged from one another into the old world monkeys, very big diverse group, the old world monkeys, and then those especially South America, these were the new world monkeys. And there are huge similarities. Okay, there are tremendous similarities between them, easily recognizable. These are monkeys, but the monkeys tend to be somewhat smaller. That we say they are more gracile, and that is a reflection of the fact that they're almost exclusively arboreal. They live in trees. There's one major distinction between the two of them. They both have tails, which is characteristic of the monkeys. They have tails, but the New World monkeys, the tail is very muscular and is almost like a fifth limb. It is a grasping tail. They can wrap it around branches. They can hang from it, etc. That's not true of the Old World monkeys. The Old World monkeys, the tail is not as useful as it is in the New World monkeys. So we share a common ancestry with these. We are in the same group. We're in the Anthropoidia with them, which reflects the fact that we have a common ancestor. So the other group in the Anthropoidia, the other anthropoids, are this group that are called the ape. We informally refer to them as the apes. And their major characteristic, apart from the fact that they are usually bigger than monkeys, is that they have larger brains than monkeys. That's the first thing. But second of all, there is no tail. Well, at least I wouldn't say that there's no tail. Let's say that the tail is so reduced that it's not visible. And this is true of humans. Our tail is reduced to a set of fused vertebrae in our pelvis, in a little triangular shaped bony protrusion called the coccyx. And that's all that remains of our tail. Interestingly enough, I should tell you, every now and again, a baby will be born with a tail. And that's very interesting because it suggests that it's usually a short tail, but a proper tail with vertebrae in it and everything. And that is a reflection of the fact that the genes for tail are still present in our genome. We still have somewhere in there, we have genes for tail, but they're not activated. In 99.9% of the time, they aren't activated. It's just every now and again, a baby will pop up where that gene was activated, and they'll have a short tail, which gets taken off, of course, gets amputated. So with that diversion, I would tell you that in this group of the apes, we have these different types: gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees. A group you may not have heard of, bonobos, which they used to think they were chimpanzees, and they're not. They're a completely distinct group, the bonobos, and humans. We are fairly closely related to all of these by common ancestry, but with these, chimpanzees, bonobos, and humans are extremely closely related. Extremely closely related. We share way more than 90% of our DNA sequence is identical to the chimps, bonobos, and us. So the last common ancestor of the old world monkeys and of the apes is about 20 to 25 million years ago. Now, that sounds like an awfully long time, but it is not. In geologic time, that is quite recent, 20 to 25 million years ago. The mammals had been evolving extensively for about 60 million, 65 million years. Ever since the dinosaurs had been wiped out, the mammals had replaced dinosaurs. You can think about it like that. And so this last common ancestor, which led to the old world monkeys and the apes, about 20 to 25 million years ago. And those characteristics are very marked in the apes: no tail, and the large brains. And one of the characteristics of the apes is learning ability. They have extensive learning ability, as I hope you've all learned by now. Here are our closest relatives. The gibbons are the most remote. In the apes, they're the closest probably to the ancestor. The orangutans, these are all Far East apes, and you can see very clearly, first of all, the primate features. Second of all, the grasping hands, and for those which are fully arboreal, the grasping feet as well. So they are very, very good, highly adapted to living in trees. These hardly ever leave the trees. That is not true for the other apes. The other apes can climb well, but also spend a lot of time on the ground. And that, we believe, is interesting from an evolutionary point of view. These are the gorillas, these very large great apes. And these are our closest relatives, the chimpanzees here and the bonobos. Now, there's a similar look between chimpanzees and bonobos, but they are completely distinct from one another. They are different species of a genus called Pan, P-A-N. They're two different species. And their behavior is completely different. We are closer to bonobos than we are to the chimps. We're very, very closely related to both of them. But we're actually closer to the bonobos, and their behavior is much more human than that of the chimps. Now, when we say that the apes are large-brained, that is large-brained only in comparison to other primates like the monkeys. Monkeys have much smaller brains in general for their size than the apes do, but the brains of both chimpanzees and bonobos, gorillas, they are not large compared to the brain of the human. Humans have prodigiously large brains, much, much larger, more than twice the size of chimpanzees and of bonobos. Well, with that said, I should point out, though, that the size of brain is not necessarily a reflection of intelligence or whatever. It's organization of the brain, which is also important, appears to also be important. Our brains are, in general, organized pretty much similarly to those chimps, bonobos, but our cerebral hemispheres have areas which are much, much more developed than they do. And these are centers for things like abstract thought, language, all of that sort of thing. So anyway, those are our closest and very fascinating relatives. And it's a humbling thing to study the lives of these organisms, because so much of human behavior is reflected in their behavior, good and bad. So as I say, compared to us, the chimps and bonobos are relatively small-brained. They have what we regard as being primitive characteristics. Their jaws are very robust, very, very heavy, and so are their teeth. Their teeth are quite highly differentiated. For example, they have very prominent canines, especially the males, extremely prominent canines. Their teeth are very robust because they, of course, first of all, do not cook their food. They don't cut up their food into small pieces with a knife and fork and put it in their mouths. They depend entirely upon being able to tear food apart to manageable size and then put it in the mouth, and they have to prepare the food by chewing. They have a very diverse omnivorous diet. They will eat fruit, vegetables, and they are active hunters as well. They will prey, for example, extensively on monkeys and on other things that they do encounter. They have very, very complex social structures. The bonobos and the chimps, their social structures do differ from one another. They tend to be matriarchal societies. It is seniority of females which gives the structure to the society. When we look at their behavior, both chimps and bonobos, we see that they do spend time in trees. They climb actively. They also sleep in the trees. At night, they will build nests. They'll weave branches together to make a little hammock that will sleep in. That's obviously for safety sake, getting them up off the ground where predators could get them. But they spend a lot of time on the ground. And on the ground, they locomote in a distinctive way. And that is that they walk on their knuckles, on their front knuckles, like that. The back feet are flat, but the front feet are knuckles like that for them to walk. They can walk upright, but they have an anatomical structure which doesn't really allow them to walk upright easily. I don't know if I've got a... I'm sorry if I had a... Let me just fiddle here. Can I? No, I can't. I was looking to see if I could draw for you. I'll just have to draw it with this pointer, perhaps, and hope that you can work out what. If you think about our pelvis is like this, right, with the legs directly underneath. So that's the human pelvis that allows us to walk upright. Their pelvis is long, like this. And so picture the fact that they spend most of their time on all fours, knuckle walking, and their pelvis is long, like this, with the legs coming off. Now, if I take that long pelvis and I take this torso and I'm push it upright, they can do that. They can go upright, but they have this long pelvis pushes them into a very awkward stance, and they have to walk with their legs wide apart to keep their balance. So while they can walk upright, they don't do it extensively. They don't do it for a very long time. It uses a lot of energy, and it's a very awkward stance. Sometimes it's very useful to them, but nonetheless, it's not a predominant stance that they will adopt. It's not that easy for them to do it because their anatomy simply doesn't allow them to. The one thing which is really important about them, about both chimps and bonobos, is that they are able to use tools. Now, these are not, they can modify things to a certain extent. For example, this very young chimp has learned, probably from it's been taught by its mother. It's eating termites. And what it's doing is it went and it selected a twig. And this twig has been stripped. They will sit and strip all the bark and the leaves off to be left with this woody straw. But it's quite flexible. And they come to a termite mound and they insert it into the holes. You can see the openings into the termite mound. They will insert it into these holes. And the termites see this as an enemy. The soldiers, termites, grab onto it and bite it. And the chimp will pull the straw out and lick all the termites off and eat them. Very, very nutritious indeed. And this is a common occupation, and it's common social occupations as well. They will get together, all of them doing their little fishing expedition. Here is another chimp, and this one is using a rock to bash open rotten logs, also for getting insects. They will select certain rocks. They will select them, but they do not modify them in any way. They just pick up the rock and use it. But it's real tool use. This is definitely tool usage, and it's intentional. It also has a certain amount of volition to it. What I mean by that is there's a certain amount of choice. The chimp doesn't just pick up any old stick and shove it in. There is definite decisions made about what will work well and what won't. And it can be modified slightly, but there's no lengthy planning here. I have put here, I hope it still works, a YouTube video which you can watch. But quite honestly, if you go to YouTube, you can find any number of really good videos about chimps and bonobos, which are extremely fascinating. So these are the bonobo groups, the bonobo group. And bonobos are by far our closest relative. We share a common ancestor with bonobos relatively recently, in other words. And if you just look at them, you'll realize that there is something there, right? There is some similarity there, but they have a fascinating social structure, which I won't go into in great detail. They have a fascinating social structure, which is really, really bears strong resemblance in many ways to human social structures. And they're truly a fascinating group, also highly, highly endangered, unfortunately. They are hunted for meat, but they are also subject to habitat destruction in their native habitats in West Africa. And as a result, the populations are highly, highly endangered. We do have troops in captivity, but the wild bonobos are very highly endangered. Something that really interests me about the bonobos is they have very, very individual faces. Their faces are incredibly distinctive, and I don't know why it is we don't tend to recognize individual chimps as easily. I'm sure you do if you work with them. But the bonobos have very, very distinctive faces, one from and that actually features prominently in their social interaction. If we look at our genes, at the genetic structure, we're more than 99% identical. Now, this is a reflection also of the fact that that 1%, or whatever, difference is enormously significant, because while we are closely related to them, we share a relatively recent common ancestor. We are very, very different to them. We can learn a lot about our own human behavior and everything by studying them, because it is reflective of our behavior. But we are enormously different to them. It is wrong to kind of see them as being another kind of human. They are not. They're very distinctly, very, very different to us. And one of the things to remember is that while we regard them as being clever animals, they do have a very small brain, and they are still very much driven by instinctive behaviors. They have a lot of learned behavior as well, but they are largely driven as well by instinctive behaviors much more strongly than humans are. Okay, so I'm going to place us as humans and then finish for the day. And to tell you that we are in a group of the apes, separate from all the others that I've talked of, called the hominins. And the hominins are our close relatives. They are apes which we believe lie close to the ancestral lines that have led to humans. And we are members of the genus Homo. There have been many, many different species of Homo. We know that. We know that from the fossil record. And in fact, there have been other species of the genus Homo. There have been other species of man relatively recently in the past. But we are now the only living member of the group. We are the only member of the genus, and our species name is sapiens. And the first Homo sapiens arose about 200,000 years ago. Almost all human evolution has taken place in Africa. And where it hasn't taken place in Africa, it has taken place in groups which emerged from Africa. So 200,000 years, that is really, in geological time, very, very young. We have not been around for very long at all. And it should humble us to realize that that all of these species, previous species of the genus Homo, actually have gone extinct. And some of them were enormously successful, and successful for far longer than 200,000 years before they went extinct. And remembering that the rule of evolution is extinction, we should really be somewhat humbled to look at our fossil record and realize that the vast majority of our relatives are extinct, and that we are the very last of the species, of the genus Homo. And we name ourselves Homo sapiens, and that means wise man. It means wise man. And we need to think very carefully about how wise it is that all of our other relatives, even those which are still alive, like the chimps, the bonobos, the apes, the orangutans, the tarsiers, everything else, they have adapted superbly to their environments. They live superbly in their environments, and they do not destroy their environment. This is what distinguishes humans, is that we are able to modify our environment extensively. We don't fit in with our environment the way other animals need to do. We actually change our environments around us to suit us. And in doing so, that is one of our huge advantages. It's one of the things that has made us successful. For example, we learned to use fire, right? We learned to use fire. That meant we could penetrate into cold habitats and survive there perfectly well. We could cook our food. We could stay warm. We could keep predators away, etc., all by the use of fire. But at the same time, we are modifying our environment continually. We're chopping down forests to burn them. Etc., etc. Human beings have advantages, which may turn out to be disadvantages in the long run if we're not careful. So the things that distinguish us as humans, first of all, is our upright gait. We are perpetually upright. We locomote in upright stance. We're the only ape to do that. We have very much larger brains than any of the other apes. And those brains are capable of things which maybe we may see glimmers of in the other apes, but in humans, they are extensively developed. And this is the ability to have symbolic thought, to almost say philosophical thought, if you want. We have artistic expression, which is uniquely human. We plan, manufacture, and use of complex tools, and we have done for millions of years. When we look at the beautiful hand axes and things, which I'll show you, those things are carefully planned with an aesthetic. They're not just things which are made and discarded. They are made with a certain aesthetic. When we look at our morphology, we see various things, but the one thing which strikes us, looking through like the fossil record, is the reduced facial structures. The jaws become reduced, the teeth become reduced. These are probably reflections of the fact that we learned ways of manipulating our food. So those are the sort of human characteristics that we're going to be tracing, along with some cultural things as well. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there, and I'll complete this section at our next class on Monday.